Here.
O'Brien.
Here.
Butterfield. Osmus. Here. Bagerly.
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Stand for the pledge, please. You got a flag? You got a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Joining us is Robert Kringle. Robert is standing in place of Robert Scott.
Correct.
Hello there.
Welcome. First item, consent item. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Need approval of the agenda, or if you're good to add it. Any other? Call the question. Yeah, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I'm used to Judy doing it.
Mark it up. I thought it's too simple. I shouldn't have to do this.
All right, we have one consent item. The contract between the city of Willmar and Willmar Supervisor Unit. Leslie.
It's a consent agenda, so if you want to just approve the consent agenda, that's all you need to do.
Right.
If there's questions.
Get a motion to approve the consent agenda items. Second. Got a motion and a second.
Audrey's got a hand.
Audrey.
I just would appreciate, I know we got a copy of it, but just going over the changes and kind of the highlights of
Oh, I had sent it, I sent an email to you too, but it was the same as everybody else's. 3-year contract, 443. The employees took the total health insurance increase for 2023. City will contribute an additional 2.5% for 2024 and 2025.
Otherwise, the rest of it was the same. Thank you.
Right. Favor say aye.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Regular business, school resource officer suspension agreement. Who's taking this?
Well, between Chief and Robert, Robert, do you want to just give an overview of what's been happening over between our conversations and what's happened over the last week?
Yes, I will do. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you is the agreement entitled The Suspension of the School Resource Officer Agreement between the City of Willmar and the Independent School District 347. This agreement was drafted with the input and the collaboration of the Willmar School District, and I'll provide you your background context, and then I would love to hear from Chief Felt, as he's really the expert in this issue. To go all the way back to the beginning, on June 23rd, 2022, the city contracted with the district regarding the Student Resource Officer Program for this school year. The legislature, during its last session in St. Paul, passed several statutory changes, some of which implicated how student resource officers can conduct themselves in the course of their business. Our firm learned about those changes on August 11th, right as the school year was about to begin, and when we started to hear many concerns from chiefs of police around the state, including Chief Felt, about how those laws would be implemented. Based on those concerns, this council voted to terminate their student resource officer contract back on September 5th. Shortly after that vote was taken, it's my understanding that Leslie and Chief Felt began to negotiate more directly with the school district and their leadership regarding this student resource officer agreement and also regarding the provisions of this suspension agreement before you now. On September 11th, the school district passed a resolution conditionally approving the suspension of this contract, so long as the city would agree to fund and assign 3.75 officers to their school properties, which is the same number that was in the original contract. We had some internal discussions between the city administrator and Chief Felt, and essentially following up after their negotiations with the school district leadership. On September 20th, just last week, is when the notice was officially sent to the school district that started the 90-day termination clock. The 90 days, as it is set now, will expire on December 19th, 2023, at which point the contract will be formally terminated. We had previously drafted a notice letter with the intent of sending that on September 6th, right after the hearing. That did not occur. That was delayed because of these negotiations that were going on with the school district. But that was sent last week, and that 90-day clock began ticking. Essentially, this agreement in front of you today is a suspension agreement, which was negotiated with the support of the school district. And this lays out the interim parameters of how the city and the school district will operate in regards to their student resource officer program until it is terminated on December 19th. So for all intents and purposes, this agreement should be viewed more as interim operational orders, the provisions of which we laid out in an attempt to protect the city and its officers from enhanced liability, and also to make clear the legal relationship between the school and the city until that termination date is reached on December 19th. That is kind of an overview of where we are until this point and what or how this agreement came to be. And I would like to defer to Chief Felt to provide his perspective on where things stand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council here. It's been a kind of a long process. Starting in August is when the police department first became aware of the law changes here, and the school found out at about the same time. So it's been a fluid situation with a lot of different aspects weighing in on it. I want to thank Mr. Kringler for his help and guidance on all this. That it's been very helpful for us. That during this time here, I want to thank the council for approving the termination of the contract. We feel that that's an important step in protecting our school resource officers legally during this time period. Want to thank the school board for considering the suspension agreement too that you have for consideration tonight. We feel that's part two of a three-pronged approach to best protect the officers. The third is that after some additional encouragement, the Attorney General did issue a second opinion regarding the legal wording and the legislation that happened. In that, there is some additional clarity provided about the use of force, and in certain instances where there's not a direct threat of bodily harm or death to somebody else, that an officer still can use reasonable force. Parts of it are still hazy enough that we feel that it's important enough to continue with the contract termination, or that actually has taken place, but would encourage you to consider the suspension agreement to best protect the officers. I've been doing some additional research with other departments. Most departments are like us, that a lot of departments, I should say, in the state have completely pulled their school resource officers out of the schools, and they mainly have them patrolling nearby if something happens. There's a few that are like us that have some kind of a process going with the contract where they're remaining in school with limited duties. There's really hasn't been anybody that's put their officers back in the school since the Attorney General gave a second, more detailed opinion on this. So I reached out to the Minnesota Chiefs of Police, Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and then I also got some correspondence from Law Enforcement Labor Services, the union that represents our police officers. And while they feel that there was some additional clarity provided, there is still concern about use of force in the post board regarding labor and employment matters concerning officers' post licenses. So it doesn't provide a lot of clarity on, in Minnesota now there's some changes where to be a police officer, you have to have a police officer license. If that license gets taken away, you can't be a police officer anymore. Now the post board is able to remove licenses from officers without them being convicted of certain crimes or things like that too. They can be accused of, like, and one of them is unreasonable use of force, that they don't have to be convicted of crime, but you can have your post license taken away without the full due process there. So that's concerning. That's one item that we hope will be cleared up in the legislative session. And my understanding is the lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have committed to talking about this further once the legislature reconvenes in February. So we hope there will be a resolution. From my perspective, I guess I would urge you to consider that suspension agreement. I think that gives the best protection for officers. Our plan is to keep the officers in the school as long as we, I guess, have the instructions or financial backing from you as a council there. The plan is that as soon as there's enough clarity to pursue another contract, we want to do that as quickly as possible once things are cleared up too, so we can get back to whatever the new normal is going to be on that.
So what will an SRO look like now? What will their performance be? What will their duties be? What can they do? Can't they do?
Sure, no, great question. Because school started before we had any kind of, before it was brought to the council about termination of the contract, there was a lot of unknowns. What we did was we tightened down what we would have our school resource officers do. So we wanted to make sure that, and the school was on board with that, they don't deal with the like code of conduct violations, or, if somebody's wearing a hat or an inappropriate t-shirt or something running down the halls, our officers aren't going to take a lot of action on that. They'll notify a school official, the school official will take care of it instead. So some of those things will stay in place, but largely from the combination of everything here, that school resource officers can kind of go back to probably about 90% of what they were doing beforehand with the legal protections here is what we kind of envision anyway. So kind of back to business as usual to a certain extent.
Chief, without trying to violate anybody's privacy, since you started this program, has there been any situations in school that would unreasonable force? I mean, have you taken that a look?
We have, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any complaints about use of force by any school resource officers. Our school resource officers don't get a lot of complaints. Every once in a while, you might have a parent that feels that their child was, maybe singled out or treated unfairly or something like that, but I'm not aware of any use of force incidents we've had complaints on. Use of force incidents do happen at the school. We've already had a couple that have happened. The officers they're pretty nervous about it. They've reported to me right away. They've written full reports, and that fits under the new statute too, where somebody was in danger of being injured and they had to intervene, and they had to use, it was very minimal force, but it would have been a violation, to put them in a prone position if they hadn't been trying to hurt someone or that type of thing, but it was the safest thing for them. So yeah, so complaints, very few use of force incidents, relatively few, but they do happen.
If I understand that the suspension, it requires us to refund the 116,000 when we sign this. Is this correct?
Yes, I can chime in on that. That is part of the suspension agreement. That dollar figure was calculated by Leslie at the rate of $1,264.52 a day. That reimbursement, in our opinion, is crucial to protect the city's potential liability should an incident occur. And that's because under the law, these restrictions apply to those serving as agents of the district. One of the first things a court would look to when determining whether or not the officer was acting as an agent would be, is there a contract in place and were they being paid by the school to be there? So this reimbursement language serves the purpose of clarifying that there's no longer this agency relationship to serve the purpose of protecting those officers and the city's ultimate liability from this uncertainty that remains in the law. And on that point, the Attorney General's most recent opinion, which Chief Felt laid out very accurately and well, does point out remaining uncertainty in the law, and what is defined or how an agent is defined is one of those areas of uncertainty. The Attorney General pointed that out directly. So that's where the reimbursement comes from.
I understand, and I'm supportive that we're in this position that we have to do this, or should approve this suspension tonight. But I would really like to see administration sit down with the school district right away to try to come up with another way that we can do an agreement. That this will end on December 19th, and then what? And so I think I'd like to see us do that. I was at a League of Minnesota Cities retreat last week, and this was talked about in general kind of with other cities, but also I think the concern that when the legislature starts, there is not a guarantee that some of these things will be changed. In fact, there are some things that I think were already in the law. I think there needs to be clarification of that with that, but there's no guarantee that this is going to change. And so I'm very supportive that we need to keep SROs in the schools. However, I think we need to work with the school district. I'm not sure that the city should pick up the tab for the whole year. And so as part of the suspension, I'd really like to see us make an effort to get back with the school to work on what next.
Else? We need to approve the agreement if we're done asking questions.
I'd make a motion to approve the school resource suspension agreement with the condition that that administration go back and Chief Felt go back to the school district to begin negotiations or discussions about the next year.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know if we can have the caveat about the condition afterwards, because I think a lot of that's going to depend on the legislature. And as far as us getting together with them, they can't pay.
Well,
so that
this is, may I go ahead?
Go ahead.
That's part of the reason I put in it. This is only good till December 19th. The legislature isn't going to convene until February.
right.
So we're going to have to come up with something else in the meantime. And there's no guarantee that when the legislature convenes that it's going to change. And I think the school district probably is sitting in the same place that we are. And Chief Felt is sitting is, okay, we now have a plan in place till December 19th. Then what? I just think, and also his letter was just written on September 20th. It's just getting out there. in that same discussion, there are other people looking at how can we get back together? How can we make this work? Some schools are gonna continue to do that. I just want us to be proactive instead of wait.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my understanding is the school cannot, we can't have the school pay the officers because then they become an agent of the school again. So I don't know how we can avoid not paying them through the city.
Well, this is only good till December 19th.
Right.
So we haven't agreed to pay for the rest of the year, one way or another. So something else is going to have to take place. And so, you know, if there are other communities that make a decision that what the Attorney General put out is good enough to go back to some sort of agreement, that's what I want us to do. I want us to be proactive versus wait. And the legislature can convene and not make any changes. And then what? But I just like for us to take the next steps and to sit down and have a conversation.
I thought we did say we were going to keep them in the schools and that the city would just pick up their salaries.
That was my understanding.
That was the chief's direction to the council, but the council did not really vote for them.
Oh, okay.
Say that that's really, I mean, that was the conversation that the chief had with the school district, but it's still up to the council to formally vote on that procedure.
By way of the agreement.
Well, this agreement only covers the first half, and like as Nelson said, that only takes you to December 19th. So after December 19th, I think there still needs to be some kind of agreement also after this or before this ends to go till the end of the year. What that looks like, I don't know. I mean, that's where Chief Felton will have to work with us and come up with, with a plan on what that looks like. If we can minimize some of that expense of, the officers or what, I can't say what that looks like yet, but that is something we're gonna have to work with the school, I would say, on that.
I think we also just have a responsibility financially. After we got our budget and we're looking at the increase that we're looking at, what are we not going to do if we have to pick up the dollars for the rest of the year? Where will all of that money come from? And so I think it's a responsibility. We had a contract with the school that the school was willing to pay. There are concerns, yes. Are the concerns out, where are they at? How does it play out after the changes that have come? And I think that it deserves sitting down and having that conversation.
I agree, Audrey, that we definitely need to be as proactive as we can be. Right now, I can't see how we can work out something where the city doesn't pay because the school can't. Under the terms, as I understand it right now.
But maybe there's something that can be worked through.
Right.
With
And
resource officers.
Right, and I agree with
the
you that,
school
that
to
we
go
need
back
to,
some sort of cut.
right, right.
Well, I just don't know what that would look like. I mean, as far as the
We don't-
contract without money. I mean,
We don't have to know that though right now, because
I know that, but, are you talking about like their job duties and what they would do
I don't-
during the day?
I don't know. I don't know. I just think that there's been enough changes and enough concerns that we just shouldn't do a blanket, we're done, and write out a check. I think the school would like to sit down and negotiate also. And I think we should try. And what that means, I don't know. But to just do this tonight only takes us to December 19th.
I feel like our chief has done a really good job of looking at other communities and seeing what they're doing. And I really trust that he'll do that before December to figure out what to do next.
So you agree with sitting down again, because this just came out
Yeah.
in September.
Yeah, of course, but I
I just assumed that would happen.
yeah, I think we trust our chief and our administrator to do that, and we'll just, they'll see what other communities are doing.
That's all I'm asking and making it part of this so that the next steps can happen.
So is there any way we could change an ordinance and say, if you want a police officer to come to your business, not just the school, for an hour, 2 hours, and charge so much an hour? That feed the system or not?
I'm not certain that would solve the issue regarding student resource officers completely. I'll say this, I think, as Chief Felt alluded to, this is still a bit of an unsettled and shifting landscape. I think, communities across the state are still evaluating how to approach this. That Attorney General's opinion did change the interpretation many had of these laws. But that still leaves a level of uncertainty that many are not comfortable with, including Chief Felt. I'm not a law enforcement expert. I'm a lawyer. I'm familiar with what is written in the law and how it's applied. Chief Felt is familiar with the day-to-day operations of his officers and what protections they need. And so we would defer to his judgment on that specifically. Now, these are all just steps we're taking to try to limit the liability here. We can't guarantee an outcome. We can't guarantee that putting the suspension agreement in place will prevent all potential liability. Ultimately, it'll go to the courts. The courts can interpret laws as they wish. The unique thing about this Attorney General opinion is that while it holds a very important legal significance, and in fact, in the realm of schools, it's considered a decisive opinion, the courts do not have to abide by the Attorney General's interpretation. So in terms of taking what steps we can to limit that liability, payment was the top of our list. If we can keep our officers performing their law enforcement duties, not their traditional student resource officer duties, but their general law enforcement duties in and around the schools. And if we remove the payment from that relationship, it gives us a very strong argument to the courts, should an issue arise, saying that this liability shouldn't be held over that officer's head. He was not an agent at that time. So what exactly a new agreement would look like in terms of payment, I think is hard to forecast right now. But as I would say, this is still a very unsettled and shifting landscape. We're still waiting for further guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. They've previously had to retract 2 separate guidance documents about these laws. So their opinion, particularly on the liability for their officers and cities, will be very important for us to understand. But at this moment, I can't say, putting something into ordinance regarding what officers, off-duty or on-duty officers would be reimbursed for their time. I can't say that would be, a good legal workaround this issue at this moment.
What works for the fire department, if you have so many false alarms, they're charged. Fire department goes there, so. I mean, if you have an ordinance that treats everyone the same, which an ordinance is supposed to do. So if Midwest Campus wants the police officer to go out there and walk through their buildings, you would charge them by the hour or whatever. So if they want to go to Jenny O, they have an issue there, they want to walk through, charge them by the hour, so. I don't see an issue with that.
Sure, and I think that's something we would definitely consider as part of this and try to flesh out more before we get to that December date, would be our advice.
Got a motion in a second, right? Anything else? Roll call.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Feldes.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays.
That's it. Big old party. Dismiss.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.